What does it take to create a vibrant, thriving life? First, the sad news is that Thoreau was right. Most people are leading quiet lives of desperation, lacking in meaning, fulfillment, and vitality. But we choose more. We choose to create extraordinary lives. And the Art of Vibrant Living show entertains you with inspiration, empowerment, and education to create your life into a masterpiece. It's time. Let's vibe up. Hey, aloha, y'all. I am Daniel Aaron, your host, and this is the Art of Vibrant Living show. I am delighted to be with you. I'm grateful that you're here, whether it is live or by rebroadcast. Today's show is, I know, going to be an amazing, phenomenal one. Super excited for our guest. I'll tell you about him in a moment. And firstly, as you heard in the intro, it's possible for you to have an amazing, vibrant, thriving life. And if it's not what you would want, please reach out, get some support. I would love to connect with you and see how I can support you, how I can lead you to some support. So you can do that by emailing me, daniel@danielaaron.com. And let's roll on to the next piece, though, because my guest today, John Patrick Morgan, is, as I told him, I'm going to go, very first time in all these shows that I actually want to read the bio out loud. So word for word is what I mean. So check this out. This is pretty cool. JP is known as a practical philosopher, writer, and speaker. He leads a team of creating champions who teach, coach, and guide thousands of entrepreneurs and artists in being more free, loving, and powerful. By learning and embodying the creating perspective, their clients achieve a union of outcomes in spiritual growth, material success, and social impact. Post his formal studies in physics and mathematics, John Patrick built multiple small businesses, including one from a laptop and a backpack before the term digital nomad existed, developed real estate, traveled the world for years on end, coached human rights leaders, recorded albums, and toured with his band, created a children's library in Cambodia, learned to scuba dive and pilot gliders, published writing and photography, competed as a black belt and triathlete, trained with Buddhist monks in India, cycled, toured for months on end, and many other adventures. In recent years, his adventures have turned inward as family came to be. He and his wife now reside with their two young boys in the countryside at 4,000 feet on a mountain in Maui. So, the foundation of John Patrick Morgan's role as philosopher, teacher, and guide is his being a real-world practitioner. He walks his talk, lives what he teaches, and has a genuine and powerful commitment to creating everybody. Powerful words, intentional words. JP, John Patrick, thank you for being with us. I'm so grateful you're here.
Thank you. Thank you for showering me in my own language, man. That was that was nice to sit back and just listen to you create me through my own words. What a blessing. Thank you.
Yeah, well, and you know, I realized too why I wanted to read your words specifically is because I think you, more than almost anybody I know, are very, very intentional with the words you use. Right? It's not accidental, the words that you chose for your bio, and I tend to roll that way too. So I have a great appreciation of it.
Thank you, man. Yeah, syllable by syllable. I have some edits I'm going to make after listening to that, but most of it's nailed it for me. Yeah.
Right. It's always different when we hear it, when we speak it, when we hear it. So cool. And, you know, and now people know a lot more about you than most people in a 2-paragraph introduction. So that said, though, what else would you be up for sharing about, you know, just how you get to this conversation, this point in your life, just in terms of any background that might be useful for the rest of our conversation?
I think the thing that I'm present to right now, like how did I end up here living in Maui on a farm that I bought with money that I was paid by helping people to do what they love and to have a more fulfilling life, which is like insane. And I think at the core of it, I've just been unwilling to not have what I love and enjoy be primary enough that I've protected myself from the stamping out of that natural, innate, innocent orientation we all come into the world with. Somehow I made it through the public school system, and the career path without letting go. I just held on, like I just held on to this idea that I don't have to do anything that I don't want to do. Doesn't mean at times I haven't, but I've held on to that as a principle enough
Hmm.
that I've kind of carved out a way of thinking about life that has me survive and thrive with the idea that I don't have to do anything I don't want to do. And I can have the life I want to have. And so those are typically a dichotomy for people, or like you have to have one or the other. Um, so I think that's how I've ended up here, is my unwillingness to let go of that. Um, of that.
Yeah, beautiful. So that begs the question for me: how'd you do that? Right? Most people, as you indicated, kind of get that drummed out of them in some way or lose touch with that. What What was different for you?
Yeah, I mean, I wish I could tell you truthfully, like what it was. It's going to be a multitude of factors. I mean, one thing I can say for sure is having the influence of a father who was a bit of a maverick and kind of did things his way. I remember my dad was a cop in the 80s. And so, I remember we'd go to, in our regular car, not the police car, we'd go to the store, you need to pick something up and just park in the fire lane and walk into the store. It's like, you can't park here. It's like, you kind of had this little bit of a, you know, just skated the gray a little bit when it came to the idea of rules in society. And so I had somebody, my dad, he wasn't a criminal by any means, but like, he would drive a little bit faster. And so I kind of had this role model of somebody. And then I watched him become an entrepreneur as well. And so like break the mold of blue collar and become an entrepreneur and make money at, almost every other month, it was a new business card and a new business that he was starting. And so I kind of grew up with a role model of somebody who could just make what they wanted in the world, despite the world's opinion or despite the norm. So that was obviously very inspiring. Um, and I also had a mother and still have a mother. She's visiting us now here in Maui, who has always loved me unconditionally. There was never anything I ever did or said that ever gave me the feeling that her love for me was um, not present or in question. And so I think that there was a lot of slack in the line, because I knew that I would come home and be loved by my mom no matter what I did. My dad, not so much. But again, he was a role model in a different way. And so I think the combination of those two was just like, I was going to be loved, and you didn't have to follow the rules. And I think you put those two things together, and I got lucky in a lot of the ways. Now in hindsight, I can look at that consciously, and I can hold those as principles and ideas and ideals and practices, and continue to grow in that capacity, and continue to, I'm not immune to this stuff. I've had plenty of times in my life where I get caught up in thinking I need to be something and do something and go down that path. But when we're saying, objectively to the norm or the average, that little bit of, freedom that I have more than the average would probably be, I would just put it to both of them as probably the biggest influences. I'm sure there were other teachers along the way, and, things that I learned through books, through conscious attention and stuff. But yeah, my mom and dad are the big role models.
That's awesome. Yeah, and I'm sure
Mm.
you've studied and looked at a lot. Obviously, from your bio, you've been an adventurer in life.
Yeah.
Um, what was your? I'll tell you why I'm asking in a sense, but I'm curious. What was your experience like? How did you respond to your father's kind of rule breaking way of being?
I mean, I both modeled it unconsciously and judged it consciously. Right. So I don't ever want to be like my dad, unknowingly being like him more than I realized. And of course, becoming a dad, seeing it even more. Um, One of the ways that became really apparent to me was, I mean, when I was younger in business and in real estate, like he had certain ways of doing business that really triggered me, that I was like, oh, that's wrong. You shouldn't do it that way. And I, tried really hard to not do it that way. And it meant that me and my dad never really worked together. We tried a few times, but my dad was in the real estate industry, and I joined the real estate industry, but worked for a different company, even though my dad had a company, and I just couldn't work with him. So I needed to find this kind of like this distance, which is a classic father-son dynamic. But I also realized when I started to delve into archetypal work of like Carl Jung archetype stuff, um, I realized that I had been resistant the archetype of the king very much because I saw my father as a king, and I saw certain qualities in that I was resistant to and didn't want to adopt and be. Um, and when I kind of contended with that, I realized that, wow, I was just had this idea that my father was that way, and he wasn't actually. That was just my own fear that was projecting it onto him. And it really helped me to feel closer to him, to let him off the hook for some things that I had been silently judging him for that weren't true. And it gave me more access to my own leadership as a man, as a father, as a provider, but as a leader in my business.
Yeah, cool. Well, it makes sense. It's hard for any of us to escape judging our parents and being like them, right?
Yeah,
Um, and
exactly.
I thought
Yeah.
of it because when you described that, I just had this flash when I lived in Bali. I had this habit of I would get to a traffic light, and if nobody was coming from any direction, well, then I would go through it, whether it was green or red. I just thought that made
Hmm.
sense to me. Um, but my daughter, I remember her like at 5, sitting in the child seat, just like, you can't do that. She would get so upset
Mm-hmm.
about it.
Hmm.
Um, and I thought, how fascinating that I got a rule following daughter when I've got that
Mm,
rebelliousness in me. So I'm curious
mm.
to see how that develops in her too.
Yeah, that's interesting. Just now you're making me think of my 3-year-old who in the back seat, anytime we stop at any light, he doesn't care what color it is. He says, "Go, go." The innocence of like, I want to be going, we should go. I don't care what lights are doing. And then we learn the rules and then we have to learn to transcend them. So there's always this kind of three stages of development, aren't there? It's like this innocence, and then there's like this rule following, and then there's like transcendent, nuanced place where the real paradoxical power is. Yeah.
Yeah, there's that common saying that you have to know the rules before you can break them. Um,
Exactly.
yeah,
Yeah.
okay. So I'm curious to know, well, lots of things, but you use the word creating in a very
Mhm.
deliberate way, in a way different than I think a lot of people do or even think of it. All right, it's
Mm.
part of your brand in a sense. So will you say more about what that means to you?
Yeah. On the back of my mug right here, I have some words. It says, "We are creating, and being now here is primary." And that we refers to everybody and everything, by the way. It's not
Mm.
like me and you, Daniel. It's like it's not just all people. It's like everything. Me, you, the chickens, the trees. We are creating, and I use the word creating. It's a present progressive verb, but I also mean it in the sense of a noun. Sometimes I'll flesh it out as we are creation creating, or we are creation creating itself. So when I say we are creating, I mean we are creation creating itself and everything else at the same time, simultaneously. So it's just a shorthand. So for me, creating is both a thing and a doing and a happening. It's all of that at once. And so when I use the word creating, I'm representing the universe, you could say, or beyond that, everything. And I'm representing the activity. Like we are a river in the sense that like there's a river, but then there's like a river is moving and it's flowing, right? So it's both something that is and is not static. So it's honoring both the grandiosity of what we are and also the unfolding that's infinite, constant, dynamic at the same time.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah,
Yeah.
that makes a lot of
Yeah.
sense. And is there something deliberate, like you've spoken certainly other times about being a coach and your work related to
Hmm.
coaching as it's commonly
Hmm.
referred to, though it seems like you use the word creating sometimes instead of coaching. Am I
Yes.
noticing that correctly?
Yeah, yeah, I love your attention to language, man. It's super fun to have the detail that I bring to my attention to language be noticed and be able to talk about it. So thanks. Yeah, like when I discovered the world of coaching, at that time I had a web development company and I was a kind of performance magician and and I was like, what? I can just talk with people and get paid to help them, and it's called coaching. Cool. I love doing that. I already do that for free. So I would love to get paid doing that. So I went into that world. And, now 15 years in and looking back, it's like, I'm getting paid to do the thing that I've always done, but I didn't call it coaching until I heard the word coaching. And so what's the essence of it? Because I do it outside of, paid relationships. I do it with myself, and really creating it's a it's a term. I think coaching would be a subset of creating. And I say, what's the difference for me? Well, I relate to coaching as, um, helping somebody to achieve an outcome, like a
Hmm.
sports coach. It's really about your performance and the result. Whereas for me, creating includes that, but it's more than that. It's also about the means and the experience in the present moment of the work itself. Like if you were to coach an artist, you would be oriented around helping that artist get the job done well. But for me, the creating is about both getting the job done well, but also the experience of bringing the art into form, like what it's like, your joy, the fulfillment. So actually, for me, the means matters more, and that's why I said my being or our being now here, that's primary. So for me, the process is even more important than the outcome. And so it's kind of weird to say I'm a coach when I care more about your experience of the work that you're doing than your outcome. Like I couldn't tell you with honestly that I'm a results coach because results are secondary in my world. Um, so that's why I use the word creating, because it's more honest to what I'm oriented around. It just so happens that people I work with and myself do produce results, but as a beautiful and common secondary gain to our orientation.
Yeah, beautiful. Well, there's that common saying, I guess, in business in general, which is give people what they're asking for so you can give them what they need, or some variation of that. So
Yeah,
it
it makes
makes
me want to
sense.
throw up.
It makes you want to throw up. Is that what you said?
Yeah. Yeah, I just fucking hate it. It's like you know, because it's an expression of the opposite of my principle, right? To just like tell them what they want to hear so then you can get them where you really want to go, give them what they need. It's like that means the outcome of getting them matters more than the present moment of saying something to them as if it's the most important thing when it isn't. I'd rather stand as an expression of what's important to me most is now and here, and have that commitment inspire you to the value of that than to try to hook you with something that is less valuable to me and pretend it's more valuable, such that you can be attentive to me long enough for me to kind of not trick you, but walk you into the other thing. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. I'm just saying for me personally, I'm kind of obsessive about the primacy of my principle as I created this term yesterday in Latin, created a Latin term. I figured out what the Latin language was for it because I just love little Latin phrases. Docutur ambulando. Docutur ambulando. It means it is taught by walking. And so it's like, I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to try to teach you through explaining it to you. Yes. And I say that as a person who loves talking and who loves explaining things. I want for me, I want the primary means that which I inform you of something to be my walking, to be my expression of that in the present moment. And I have a hard time stomaching being something else to get you to go along with me to be something different. So, but I know that I'm, maybe alone in that, or there's not too many people that are that obsessive about it, but that's what I got.
Well, it sounds almost like you have some principles that you live by. That's a kind of a weird thing
Yes.
in today's culture.
Yeah, I do. I live
Yeah.
by that. And, I'm not going to say that it's always easy. Sometimes, again, I face my own edge with that. Can I hang with this principle? Especially when some circumstances like money gets tight. And it's like, well, if I just said this thing, it might get me the outcome. Well, I've got a principle that I live by, and I have a hard time sleeping at night if I'm not living by my principles. A harder time than if I didn't have any money. So yeah, they're primary, and that's why I put on my mug to remind me, because I need to be reminded. It's primary, dude. Remember, and that's why it's facing in. So I'm reading it every time I'm talking to you. It's primary. It's primary. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I said that in a joking way. I appreciate that and respect that and strive for it myself. Also forget it
Yeah.
at times and remember it at times. So then
Yeah.
let me dig a little deeper on that, because I think that's a juicy little piece, which is
Mm.
if somebody comes to you and says, by the way, do you prefer being called John or JP? What's your preference?
I intentionally don't express a preference because I like people calling me different things. It helps me to kind of stay zoomed out a little bit from the identity. So yeah, pick your flavor. You can call me actually anything you want. Choose your pronoun, choose your name. It's all good.
All right, cool. Well, then we'll come back to that identity question in a minute, because that's a good one
All right.
too. But if somebody comes to you and says, "Hey, I want your help to make $1 million or start a company that is producing 20 million in revenue in 1 year, right? And that's very much an outcome-based thing. What would be your response?
Yeah, we can do that. Why? I just get curious. It's not like I don't care about outcomes. I mean, I like to make money and buy the things and have freedom. So I'm interested in helping people to create those things.
Hmm.
And so that will be an entry point for a conversation for me that's of interest. It's
Hmm.
fun. I like it. It's important to me to get outcomes in the world. It's just that there's other things that I'm even more interested in. And so I will happily walk through that door because there's going to be an even more interesting room through another door within that world. And I
Yeah,
guess why was just my first question, not because it's like that's the right question to ask. That's a powerful question. I was just curious, like why?
makes sense.
Yeah.
All right, well, so now let's go to one that just popped in behind that. This idea of identity, and I saw
Mm.
something you wrote around that recently, and what we could, as an entry point, could be like, hey, you like to be called different names, to the way I interpret it, see if this lands for you, but to stay loose with your own self-identification or
Yeah.
your own identity.
Yeah.
And I have a feeling that that's something that you put forward as a valuable thing, and something that trips up a lot of people is getting rigid about their identity.
Yes.
Is that making sense?
Previously me. Yeah, of course. I mean, that's how I came to this answer, is because I was really hung up on how to present my name for so long.
Hmm.
And then I realized that the idea that there's a right way to do it was the real obstacle. And that the real freedom for me would be in allowing it to be quote unquote confusing or unclear and lots of different names. And so again, the means matters more. Tactically, from a branding level, would it make sense for me to make a decision and just have it one way all the time and not have to go through this conversation? Yes. But being immersed in this lack of clarity and these different names presences me to that whole the silliness around that whole identity conversation. And I'm still in a space where I'm valuing that. And at the time that that's not valuable to anymore, I might just be like, here it is, and everybody say it this way. But for right now, I'm finding it to be a fun reminder of how insignificant it can be if I just let it. And I find that as to be a good experience for me and relaxing into, am I John? Am I JP? Am I Johnny Pat? Am I Moses? Am I Captain Morgan? All the different names, or am I none of that? Am I something far greater than that, just like you are? And it kind of, when I'm free, I can see you through those eyes, and you're not Daniel Aaron unless you believe that you are, right? So there's something deeper here for both of us. So I'm just enjoying the moment that comes up in conversations, and so it serves a function to be unclear. It's not like
Yeah.
some trick. I'm just being honest, you know.
Yeah, well, I appreciate your how do I want to say it? Not spontaneity exactly, but presence. Being here in the moment with the conversation. You don't have. It doesn't seem like you've got like your standard answers. You're going with what's there for you now.
No, I've got a blank notebook here, and my iPhone is in the house, so I'm in my office. Just me and you.
Perfect. All right. Well, let's jump to another juicy topic. One that I think you and I have both, in different ways, been circling around, but maybe not a super familiar conversation for a lot of people, which is the concept of being. And I read
Mm,
I read something that you wrote. It's not exactly clear what it was recently, but about being a primary part of the creation process.
mm.
So, how would you define it? Like, I know how I talk about it, but I'm really curious to see, how would you define it and its importance, and what does it mean to you?
Well, I have two very distinct meanings around being, and I mean both of them when I talk about being primary. And these are just the two different standard English definitions, essentially. But one is like um, being in the sense of presence with everything beyond language, the being that is being beyond words, right? Like in the now, you know, be still and know that I am God. I don't know, whatever the language is that points in the direction of that experience beyond form, in your deepest state of meditation, when you're just being, like, I'm just being, man. Like there's that kind of being, right? To me, that's the ground from which everything everything, all thought, all form arises and emerges. That's the first definition of being. It's not really a definition, but that's what I mean by it. And then the other thing I mean by being is like, is he being a nice person? Is he being an ass? Like, who's he? Are you being tired? It's like, it's the expression. It's the expression in form. When for me, it's like, it's not just your emotional state and it's not just your behavior. It's everything. It's like who I'm being in a moment is the multiple and the expression of my thinking, my feeling, my energy, my attitude, the actions that come out of me, my way of speaking. Like it's all of it at the same time. And it's a present progressive verb, being, right? It's my essence in its unfolding as an activity. So being is an activity that's energetic and material. And it involves and invokes meaning. So it's specifically human, this type of being. And I'm a big fan of the work of Martin Heidegger, the German philosopher. And he says language is the house of being, and that there is nothing is being unless there is a human being present. So like he uses the example of a hammer in a tool shed hanging on the wall. It's not being a hammer until there's someone in the room who's present with it and seeing it and being that it's a hammer. Now it's being a hammer. If you put a 1-year-old in there that's never seen a hammer before, it's not being a hammer until there's somebody that has its meaning and its essence in them. And so being lives in the relationship between a human that holds meaning and an object, or between two people. So that's that second version of being, and I mean by that. And both of those things are primary over everything else. And I would put the first definition of being as primary to the second as well. The formless being over. I mean, I wish we had different words, but it's just kind of weird that they're used for both. But there you go.
Yeah, well, and maybe we're creating more words. I don't know.
Maybe, yeah.
Somebody yesterday just reminded me of, I had used the word love in a message to somebody, and they said, "Yeah, well, if you go back to Greek and look at all the different forms of love in that language, it's a lot different here." And
yeah, true.
Yeah, so, and it seems like, I don't know. I mean, I might be in a small world, so I think that the whole world looks like this small world in some way. But being around some of the circles that we're connected to, I hear a lot of talk about being. And so I wonder, is it coming more into the popular world, or?
I don't know. It's always hard for me to see if it's spreading when I'm inside the bubble, and I know that I'm inside the bubble. So, I mean, one of the useful ways of metrics is go to the post office and mention it to somebody in the line and see if they know what you're talking about. But it's hard to get out of the bubble, especially online. So I have no idea, man. I mean, it would be awesome if it was. I mean, I have clues. One of my favorite authors and living philosophers, Charles Eisenstein, is the political strategist for RFK, who's running for president. So that's like, what? That dude's like from a very different world, and he talks about these kinds of things. And now he's the strategist for like somebody who's literally running for president. So that's a clue to me that there's some of the stuff's going mainstream. Marianne Williamson being on the ticket, at least in the primaries, like those are clues. But again, I don't know. I'm not sure. Yeah, I hope so.
I'm with you. I hope so. Okay. Well, so this already came up in some way in the conversation. You consciously identify as philosopher, which I especially appreciate. I went to my undergraduate degree was in philosophy, religion.
Cool.
And I got the message from pretty much everybody around me, especially every adult in my family, like, what are you going to do with that? Right? To most people, that seems like the least practical thing they can possibly imagine. Maybe the exception would be like fine artist. I don't know. And so what does it mean to you, though? And I don't know. I'll ask this too, and this, I may be in the bubble again, but I have the feeling that this word philosophy and philosopher is also getting some kind of resurgence now, or arising in a way that's more popular.
I think so. Again, I could be wrong, but I think it is. But I think it's because we are facing so many existential threats and questions with the way that the world is going politically, and in the way that, governments and democracies are facing, are under existential threat, and with the rise of artificial intelligence, which is making us just question what intelligence is, which is something we're so strongly identified with all of these weird things that are appearing in the sky, and the Pentagon is saying there's UFOs that we're researching and stuff. I mean, there's like a lot of things that are in the collective psyche that are existentially destabilizing, and so I think that's where you're going to see philosophers come back into the view, because and metaphysics in particular, because science has for a long time kind of been in charge, and metaphysics is kind of not valuable. But as soon as you start to bring in some of these existentially rattling things, yeah, I think that's probably why we're seeing it. But for me, the word, it's one of those words that I just took on as a role, as an identity, because I just found myself saying one day, like, yeah, guys, if I could just have anything, if I had all the money in the world and nothing to do anything, I would just love to be a philosopher. And it's like, oh, I don't have to wait for circumstances or conditions. I can just be that. I don't have to go to university and to get a degree. But by the way, what does that word even mean? And I looked it up, and it just means lover of wisdom. And I'm like, oh, fuck yeah, I love wisdom. That's me. That's what I am. And so I know that when I put that out there, people sometimes make the assumption that that means that I have a certain intellectual capacity or I have a certain academic background, but that's their story. I'm saying it because I love wisdom, and I'm just like putting that stamp on under my name because because of what it gives me. It's not about the outcome, about what it produces. What does it do when how does it impact me when I speak it? Because I am Dokatur Ambulando. I'm teaching through walking, more than anything.
Nice. Well, and so I guess that leads me to another question that's kind of related to this in a way, which is there's something in your bio. I forget what the word was, a practitioner, that you walk your walk. Part of what I read from that is this distinction between, this is just one way of languaging it, but philosopher versus initiate, right? The one who's in theory versus the one who's in practice with something.
Yeah.
And I know for me, when I was in philosophy school, there was a part of me that was like, I'm getting kind of bored with this. We're just talking about shit all the time. Like when does this love of wisdom actually apply in life? So what's your take on that distinction? You must have thought about that.
Well, I use the term practical philosopher, sometimes pragmatic, but practical, because I'm not an armchair philosopher. Like if I sit down and read Nietzsche, I can't read it for more than an hour before I get up and do something with it. Right? Like when Nietzsche says the strength of a person's spirit would then be measured by how much truth they could tolerate, or to what extent they must have it diluted, sweetened, disguised, or falsified, something like that. Then I'm like, shit, I close the book and I get up and I say, the things I don't want to tolerate are, and then I make a list and then I look at them and it's like, wow. And if I did tolerate that and this, and then it's like, what would I do different? And so I have an orientation to make everything practical. And then, it's a throwback to my childhood, really. I'm interested in how to do things. That's why I study physics and mathematics, because I want to understand the language of how and make stuff happen and do things and create and build, And so I am very immersed in loving wisdom, but for the function of building and creating in the world. I'm alive. I only get, thoughts part of the pleasure here, but it's not all of it. I love to get my hands dirty with things. And so, yeah, there will be a ceiling on how much I can create philosophizing, because I'm not just a philosopher in the general sense. I'm interested in philosophy to the extent at which it can help me get shit done in a more fulfilling way, and then more productively as well.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so how do I want to say this? Well, actually, I'll leave that aside now, because that's something else that's right there I want to ask you about. Is you got a book that you're about to, well, I don't know how close you are, but you mentioned that you're, for the first time, for a guy who loves words, who's written a lot.
Yeah.
It's the first time you're going to put a book out. What's the score there? What's happening?
Yeah. Everybody's told me you should write a book. You should write a book. Sometimes because they, appreciate my writing that I do. And I write a lot, articles, blogs, things like that, emails. And sometimes just because, like, strategically from business decision, if you're a thought leader, that's what you should do. And neither of those reasons have been enough to have me want to do it. I think I've had some, I don't know, maybe judgment, ego based judgment of a lot of the writing books that I see that are just put out for the outcome, right? Like that principle that I have that the means matters more, it can often get a bit shadowy and it can be a bit like judgy about like how other people are doing things. And it's just really not, it's just, there's nothing useful in that, but just honoring, just acknowledging, I should say, that some of the resistance to writing a book is because I've been afraid of it being like the things that I don't like that are an expression of the opposite of my principle. So I've relaxed around that a lot. But I also just like wasn't ready. And for me, I didn't want to, because I love writing, I wanted to write a book when it was like, I want to write a book. Like I'm called to write. I have things to say and there's something that wants to come through me and I'm ready. And so I just feel that is now, I just at a time in my life where I feel like I'm ready to do that kind of project and to write in a more substantial way. So I don't know what the form is yet. I'm working on letting go of my ideas about what the forms could be or should be and just allowing something to emerge. It's more likely than not going to be some kind of allegorical story or maybe even some kind of form of poetry that tells a story. That's what I'm aware of right now, but I know that I'm committed to it happening and being published this year. And I know that I'm committed to writing on a regular basis every morning, but I don't exactly know what it's going to look like yet. So grab me in a month from now, I'll probably have a lot better idea, but it's coming. Every time that I sit and write, I get more of a sense of what it's going to be.
Beautiful. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'll rewind one moment to something you said a minute ago about practical philosophy, pragmatic philosophy, why you studied physics and mathematics. And this is in some way just a really personal question for me, because I somehow grew up with this idea from my childhood that mathematics is here and language is over here, and that they're like different camps. I remember, what was it, the SATs things that we took when we were kids, right? You got the mathematics side and the verbal side, or whatever they were called. And I kind of had this idea that, I don't know, I don't like mathematics, but the way you're speaking about it sort of casts it in a different light for me in a sense. So will you say more about what the draw was for you and what it means to you?
Well, I related to mathematics as a language that explained, like, with very consistent and trustworthy symbols, how things worked. And so, just this morning I had a meeting with one of my coaches, a financial coach, and like just getting really clear and honest with numbers. And I said, man, the value of this conversation is such that by being really clear with the math, with the numbers, I know exactly what I need to do. And so for me, the math is just a way of like, orienting myself in the world in a very effective way. It's always been like that, and also at a lower level, I should say lower level, but like the early years of math, there's numbers, and then, it's about adding things, subtracting, multiplication. But then when you get into higher math, it's a lot more conceptual and symbolic, like obviously algebra and geometry and, and trigonometry and calculus. It gets more complex and more conceptual. And I feel like it moves more in the direction that kind of where you could see that it's really a language of symbols that represent different possibilities. Like a derivative is a much more of a conceptual symbol than a number two, but yeah, that's how I've related to it. And that's why I have found and continue to find it useful. I'm not like studying math or something like that, but I do kind of like, I still like math. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. That makes sense. I'm with you.
Yeah.
All right. Well, what would be something you could share? Because, obviously a lot of your own study and work has been what could be called personal spiritual development, something like that.
Sure.
Something that comes to mind when I ask you, like, what's something that you had to overcome personally, or something that was a challenge for you that was important, that's helped make you who you are now?
Well, lots of things, of course. I don't know. I'll just go with the first thing that flashed in my mind as you were asking the question.
Yeah.
Don't know why. I mean, maybe it's relevant because I've healed it, but the diagnosis of multiple sclerosis in my early 20s was like a really existentially kind of like scary and destabilizing thing. I mean, it just like anybody when you get diagnosed with a condition at a young age, like you don't see, I think you're invincible in your early 20s. I didn't think about what I ate. I just ate whatever, food was fuel. It was mostly garbage in hindsight. But I was running on garbage and I looked like I was healthy and in shape. So unbeknownst to me, that garbage was destroying my gut lining and leaching into my bloodstream and screwing up my white blood cells, and then they were attacking my nervous system, and I went blind in my left eye like over the course of a couple of days, and the MRIs found loads of lesions on my brain, and I was diagnosed with something I'd never heard of, and the doctor told me that you can end up paralyzed or dead with this disease, and I was like, fuck. So that was scary, and taking a deep breath and then like learning and looking into it, and then standing up with some courage and with an attitude that I'm gonna meet this thing with all the resourcefulness that I have, and over the course of years and the advance of medicine and understanding about health and me continuing to stay on top of that, I learned how to be healthy in a way that I didn't even know existed. The way that I learned to eat and the way that I learned to move my body and where I chose to living in sunny environments like in tropics. So many things have led to, essentially eradicating that condition from my body. I'm sure I have the genetic predisposition for it, but I've healed my gut and I've been symptom free for over 20 years. Um, I just went to the doctor the other day and he said, I think you've healed it. So I was like, I'll take that on. Thanks, doc. Um, I also know that I caught it early and I started early. My mother has MS, and she wasn't diagnosed until she was like much later in her life. And so she's had a lot of improvement in her condition through the same type of efforts, but she's not completely out of the woods like I am at this point. Um, but emotionally, it was scary. It was difficult, but also it grew me. Like I would never, if I could go back, I would never take that away. Fuck, no way. If I had a DeLorean, I could go back and like remove MS, or I could like teach me to eat healthy food. I wouldn't take that away because it's, people always say this, but it's made me who I am. It's given me, okay, so going back to your first question, that would be another answer as how I have had the ability to hold on to this thing of only do what you love. Because when I was in my early 20s, having just graduated from college, I got kicked in the stomach with the idea that I'm mortal. I went blind in my left eye out of nowhere, and it's come back mostly, by the way, now after some steroid treatment back then. But for that time, it was like, fuck, I'm not going to waste it. It woke me up to my mortality. And we're all mortal, but like we forget. And so that diagnosis kept me present for a long time to my mortality. And now I'm just old enough that like people I know die and get heart attacks and shit. And so it's like there's plenty of reminders of my mortality now. But yeah, I wouldn't trade that. That was valuable.
Yeah, beautiful. Well, so that brings perfectly to a question that I have forgot I even had for you. I thought of this a while ago, um, about fear. Right. And I remember seeing something you said once. I think it was in relationship to why you started coaching with Steve Hardison, that part of what you wanted to overcome, and I may be changing the language from what you said, so feel free to
Mm.
correct me. But seeing that there sometimes was a gap between maybe your impulse or your action or what you were thinking, and then the actual doing of it, which
Mm.
maybe the hesitation was related to fear. But I guess in general, it's the question which I think you probably have something to say about. What's fear all about, and what does it keep us from?
I mean, at the core, what is fear all about? I mean, I think of it like a tree, like the trunk of the tree is like the ultimate fear, maybe the fear of dying or whatever. And then it branches out into like other fears that are rooted in that, but we don't really think about it or feel it or think or relate to it that way. Right. It's like the fear of the loss of relationship, loss of connection would be like a big branch. And then on that one, it might be like, the fear of not being liked, because that would that's like a branch off a branch. Fear of not being liked because I fear a loss of connection, because I fear dying if I have no connection. Like, it's primal. So, I don't know if that's what you mean, but like, to me, it's not that important that every fear is afraid of dying, because we don't meet the fear at that conceptual level. We meet it at a different level. The fear of loss of connection, um, more specifically, a fear of my fear of loss of connection with my wife is about my fear of loss of that relationship. I don't have to go then, because if I lost that relationship, I might be afraid that I'm alone and not in the tribe and I might die. It's like, no, it's just, I think I try to meet it at where their most energy is, at the level of conceptualization, where they're the most energy. So, yeah, I don't know if that answers your question, but
Well, let me
yeah.
toss in a sort of a side note on it with an example. Like, I remember many years ago, I was working with one teacher, and the focus of the teaching, we could just say, was freedom, right? Like,
Mm,
let's look at and deal with everything that keeps you from being free. And one of the ways that he tended to work a lot was looking at our hangups around sexuality.
mm-hmm,
And so, and because most of us have some real issues and challenges with jealousy, part of what he
mm-hmm,
would do is really sort of push that one. And, and I remember a time for me when working with him, it was a lot about, well, if you're attached to something, then let's face the attachment. So, however it happened, it's a long story, but basically, I was in a primary relationship with someone, and the woman that I was with was going off to be with someone else. And I wasn't like literally watching it, but it was really in my face. And I got a real confrontation with my jealousy, which, is a lot about fear, no doubt.
mm-hmm,
Um, and it was not fun. I did not
mm,
enjoy that experience, yet I became really grateful for it, because
mm,
not that I would say now I'm immune to jealousy necessarily, but I'm not ruled by it in the same way that I was then, right?
lovely.
So
Yeah.
so I tend to think that fear is sort of insidiously, holding us back, people back,
Yeah.
in general. Does that make sense?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. I
Yeah.
think everybody knows that fear holds them back. Fear, sure.
So then, how do you deal with it, or how do you work with people in order to sort of overcome it?
Yeah, I like black path and white path. Black path is like feel the fear and do it anyway. And white path is like, how are you creating the fear by how you're thinking about this situation? So I tend to do both approaches, like give you a little bit of action to do. It's like, get some courage, just take it, get your hands dirty, get your feet wet. And at the same time, let's look at how this fear is something that's being created by how you're using your mind. Because most of the time, most fear, and I would go into the high 90%, so 95, 97% of the time, the fear is completely an illusion. Like, you're worried about something that isn't going to happen, or that isn't the case. And so that's what I call the white path. So it's just like getting free of that through conversation, through some somatic work, whatever, just the pattern of fear that could be in your body. That's erroneous and irrelevant, actually. Um, yeah, but I like both. I'm a big fan of the yin and the yang, so take both paths at the same time. Usually in every conversation, I'm helping a person to liberate themselves from the illusion that creates the fear, and getting clear on a practical action they can take, whether or not they're afraid, that will have them leaning into that discomfort. So we're hitting it kind of inside out and outside in.
Yeah, nice. Well, there's that great saying. I think it's attributed to Mark Twain. I've worried about a great many things in my life, most of which never came to pass.
Yeah, I love that one. Yeah, true.
So time's moving along here for us, JP. What's coming up for you? What are you creating, like, as you're moving forward? I know about the book is coming, and that's exciting.
Yeah, this
Anything
year.
more you want to say?
Yeah, it's January 4th, man. I'm like right in the throes of the year ahead at this vision. I'm going to have three amazing events this year where I'm going to sit in circle with 25, 30 people. They're going to have some of the most profound conversations of their life that have the most radical and existentially transformative effect on them, in Maui, in Santa Monica, and London. Maui, London, Santa Monica, in that order over the course of the year. Um, and following those events, I'm going to bring together a group of 6 people for 8 months that will dive even deeper and continue on that journey. I call those master circles. And what else? Like, this year, we're going to fence in our property. I'm looking out at our yard right now along the road, and our 2 acres here in Maui, so that we could keep the deer out and keep goats and a dog in. So that would be, the following year. But the goal this year is get the property fenced in to really kind of like create a safe container for our children and the family, and our trees, because the deer are eating them. And get a pickup truck. We only have one car here, kind of minimalist, but it's time for a second car. So, this is, my wife's wine business. My wife did her first wine tasting, and I'm so excited for her. And it was a huge success. So she'll be continuing to grow that business here in Maui and do sold out wine tastings every month in this year. So, yeah, that's that's what I'm up to this year. Obviously the book and the business are kind of centerpiece of my focus, and I'm here in the office, but that's some of like the bigger picture of my life. A vacation at the end of the year with family as well.
Nice, beautiful.
Yeah.
And you used the word dialogue a moment ago, and
Mm.
what you're coming toward in the groups that you're leading. And I've
Hmm.
seen you use that word before, and for me, it harkens back to the Socratic method.
Hmm.
I get the impression that dialogue is an important word and modality for you. How so? Why so? What do you do with it? What happens?
Yeah, in my experience, like the way that I experience life and the world is that everything comes into being through dialogue, through relationship. You know, um, whether it's two pieces of wood coming together in relationship that create something else that then are structure that hold together a room or building, or whether it's two people in conversation creating an agreement that creates a possibility between them, or a man and a woman created coming into the intimate dialogue that creates a third possibility, which we call a child, or whether it's me in conversation with myself inside my own head, which brings into being a way of being, through that internal dialogue. And so for me, dialogue is really about relationship. And I do refer to it mostly in the context of language and in the dialogue of meaning. But I see the dialogue between me and you as synonymous with the dialogue between me and myself. And the same processes that I use with clients are those which I use with myself. And my goal in the dialogue I have with clients is for that dialogue primarily to advance their own self dialogue, the dialogue they have within their own heads. I say, I want the way that I talk with you to advance the way that you talk with yourself. And my goal is to put me out of business with you, because our conversations become redundant because you do that within you. And at the same time, I'm trying to get better at my ability to do that with them so that I've got some more to value by the time they get there. But that's that's the game.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I love that. So then, I don't know if this is a question that's answerable or if it will come out clearly enough, but what is the dialogue within one's head or in a client's head, for instance, that what's the contrast? What's the dialogue that is ineffective or gets in their way compared to a dialogue that is effective or helps them create what they want? Does that make sense?
Mm. Yeah, I would say that an unloving dialogue with self is very limiting, very constraining on one's sense of freedom, fulfillment, and their power. And by power, I mean the ability to make a difference in a certain amount of time. Um, and a loving dialogue with the self is very liberating, very fulfilling, light, free, and um, it's much more effective in creating impact within yourself and your own growth, and out in the world. So yeah, loving versus unloving, kind versus unkind. One of my favorite things a client's ever said to me in the 15 years of this work was Clayton Olson. He said that out of all the stuff that you've helped me to create, his growth in his business, his personal life, his home and everything, um, he said more than anything, the most valuable thing is that you've helped me to become a friend to myself.
Hmm.
And I just, every time I say that, I want to cry a little bit because I love he's a master of articulation. He'd be a great guy to have on your show. He's brilliant. Clayton Olson Coaching. You can check out his YouTube channel. But that's to me so heartwarming. Like that's moving, because at the end of the day, that's the means. That's the being that's now here. Who we're being in relationship to ourself is everything. It's the center of all of it. And so yeah, I don't know how we got there, but wow, it's a moving memory for me.
Yeah, that's great. It's beautiful. And, it brings two things to mind for me. One is you spoke earlier about your upbringing, and part of what you received from your mother was this really
Mm,
beautiful unconditional love,
hmm.
which you may be aware is not the experience that everybody has. right?
Yes. Yes.
Um,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
there's this great Hindu myth built around a character called Hanuman, and who is born. I won't tell the whole myth by any means, but he's born of a human mother and a god father.
Mm,
So, which maybe sounds a little bit like your mythology in a sense. Um,
mm,
and eventually, he has this kind of fall from grace, big transition period, and the gods all say we got to take him away from his mother because his mother doesn't see that he can do any wrong, right?
mm,
Um, and that but eventually he remembers his divinity and he comes to love himself and he becomes a hero in that mythology. Um,
mm.
so that all kind of leads, and it's a great story. If you don't know it, you probably love it. But
I would love it because I already love Hanuman. I didn't know that story. I've got a Hanuman statue by my pool with a special light on it so I can see it at night when I walk out on my lanai. But thank you. That is beautiful, man. If you can refer me to where I can dive deeper into that, I would love to read more about that. That was beautiful.
yeah, the whole story is really beautiful. Um, anyway, I'll leave that aside because I want to get to the sort of the practical question for the listener, the viewer, which is for people that didn't grow up with a mother like Hanuman or a mother like yours, who do tend to struggle with loving themselves, being a friend to themselves. What do you suggest? How can they do that?
My client Rachel wrote an amazing little book after our work. Let me show it to you. Hold on. It's really short. And Ellen, the TV host, just made it like one of her book, like the book that she gave out for her 12 Days of Christmas thing. It's like she's going to be super famous, Rachel, because she's super, super cool too. But this book's called How to Love Yourself in Less Than a Week and Also for the Rest of Your Life by Rachel Medorsky. Or come hang out with me. I'm pretty cool too. I can help you to love yourself more. And I've got a YouTube video channel with almost 1,000 videos on there that give little little supplements about how to love yourself more. But here's what I would say too. It's like, get yourself into the conversation about how to do that better and stay in the conversation.
Hmm.
That's why I don't work with people for like one session. I work with people for many months, many years, because there's no end to how being immersed in the conversation with somebody who can help you to see how to love yourself more. I mean, it just gets better and better. As long as I'm keeping on that game and going further, I'm going to continue to have more to offer to people. So, get immersed in the conversation, in the dialogue,
Yeah,
in a loving
hallelujah. I'm with
dialogue.
you.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Okay. And so then and we're just about out of time, but what's the best way for people to get in touch with you, contact you?
My website is, I have two websites. My personal website is jpmorganjr.com, and my other website is wearecreating.com. That's where my online courses are. And jpmorganjr is my social media handle on like every website. So you can find every social media channel, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. I'm everywhere.
Perfect. Okay, cool. So, goodness, time flies. That brings me to the last question I have for you. It's the big question. It's the impossible question. Is it okay if I ask you one more?
Yes.
All right. So you obviously have a ton of experience. You've got a lot of presence, knowledge, a lot to share. If you had to boil it all down into one thing to say, a piece of advice, something to offer people in terms of how they can best create their most vibrant, thriving life, what's the one thing that you would say?
Create their most vibrant, thriving life. Yeah. I would say give yourself permission to daydream, because people, if they start to imagine a vibrant, thriving life, they will stop themselves out of the habituated idea that that's a waste of time, that they shouldn't do that. Don't, like pay attention, stop daydreaming. We learned that at a very young age. But the thing is if you daydream about that often enough, and you really hold your attention on like really seeing what the vibrant, thriving life looks like, and not allow yourself to start down that path, but then be entertaining yourself with all the reasons why and imagining how it can't happen and all your fear. No, you stay in the beautiful, vibrant, thriving image, you will start to become captivated by it, raptured by it. You'll start to have the experience of gratitude for having already experienced it, because imagination is powerful. And that gratitude and that captivated attention will start to orient your behavior and your thinking, and you'll start to notice opportunities to bring that into form. And in the same way, my 7-year-old has the imagined idea of building a fort out of the cushions on the sofa, and then within 5 minutes, the entire sofa is torn up, and there's a fort there. Like, your world will rise to meet your imagined reality. So, yeah, I would say daydream your ass off as to what a vibrant and thriving life looks like, and you'll find that your world will rise to meet it.
That's beautiful. Yeah. And it fits so well with this like growing body of work around future self psychology,
Hmm.
which is a whole nother conversation. I want to give a shout out to Andrea, who's made a bunch of comments that I just saw now. I'm not good at multitasking, so I didn't see any of the comments before, but thanks for all your comments, Andrea.
Yeah,
And
thanks everybody commenting. Yeah.
yeah. And look, Steve commented, well, sorry, y'all. I'm just not good on the comments. It's a failure of mine here in this thing. I'm a one-track guy. JP, thank you so much for being here with us. I really appreciate not just, taking the time here, but all that you've done in your life to create yourself to be who you are, in your language, to create the power that you have to affect something positive and support people. I really appreciate that. And I appreciate you being here.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. It was really fun, Daniel. I loved your presence and your questions.
Awesome. Beautiful. All right. And y'all, our viewers, our guests, thank you so much, because you being here is what makes this go. And please, please know I appreciate you. I love you. The fact that you're not only interested in learning and growing and creating your vibrant life, but you're doing something about it. Not only does it make your life better, it makes the world better. So thanks so much for being with us, y'all, and tune in soon. I'll see you later. Aloha. Mahalo for tuning in to the Art of Vibrant Living show, y'all. I'm Daniel Aaron, and may you live with great vibrancy.